Hey everybody, live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, X, Instagram. Get Ion on pause. I think we're good to go. Are we good to go? I think we are. One of the risks of doing these live streams, there we are, I had to find my camera, is that, I took a little swig of Diet Coke as I was getting prepared here. And, I need to clear my throat and other sounds are coming out of me. I wasn't on mute. Hopefully, if Ashley's listening, we can cut off the introduction here or some of it, the 2 minutes that we're waiting for people to join in. And as we are waiting for people to join in, I will say that this week has marked the 1-year anniversary of the passing of my father, James Sinclair. A bit of an emotional week for me. James Sinclair, a husband, a father, a grandfather, a brother, an uncle, all those things. It's hard to believe it's been a whole year. Time flies really fast when you're doing these sorts of things. Sounds good from Facebook. Thank you for that, Ashley. I'm having problems getting my comments working here. Anyways, let's hope that works out. Time flies when you're doing these sorts of things. And for those of us that were lucky enough to have a father in our lives, I know that's not true of everybody, but for those of us that were that lucky, we've been heavily influenced by that parent, and I'm no exception. And that's for both good and bad. We obviously pick up the life lessons, the examples that resonate with us as we're going through life. For me, for example, from my father, I'm certain I've picked up my sense of responsibility and fighting for my family and work ethic, all of those things that are related. And those are values that have really served me well throughout my life and in my career. On the negative side, he used to have a sign in the office that said, "Don't sweat the small stuff." I took that to heart as a young business school graduate and starting in my career. Don't sweat the small stuff. Well, we laughed about that later in life because when he only had a month or so to live and I was spending much time with him, I would say, Dad, that's the worst piece of business advice I've ever heard in my life. Like that's just horrible. You definitely need to sweat the small stuff. And he said, "Hey man, that was a joke. You shouldn't have, what are you talking about?" Anyways, sweat the small stuff. Miss you, Dad. Welcome to a week in review. That's enough time for people to join. A week in review at Sinclair Range. My name is Scott Sinclair. I am president, owner, founder of Sinclair Range. The mission here on this particular show is to provide you some insight into what's going on every week at Sinclair Range as we crawl out of the year and a half that I was sick and everything went to crap, and we're in rebuilding mode, and you are coming along for the ride. We'll have the usual segments today. It'll be your window into the real deals and world of decisions and deal making and day-to-day business adventures. We have a lesson of the week. We have an interesting file or deal of the week, struggles of the week, Scott's observations of the week, and let's dive into it. Speaking of don't sweat the small stuff and sweating the small stuff, I spent a large part of my week this week, me personally drafting term sheets and similar types of agreements, and also working through the financial models that are required to support the deals that are being documented in the term sheets. What are those financial models? We've talked about them on this show before. In every business, whenever you're transitioning, because we say that's what we do at Sinclair Range, right? We help a business go from here to there. That could be high growth. It could be financial distress. It could be anything that has chaos and it needs order brought to it so that you come out the other side in a better position, that you make that journey. And the tools you need from that, from a numeric point of view, from a math point of view, are the two financial models. You need the 13-week cash flow, which helps you week by week manage your cash needs, to plan, to report, do all those sorts of things. And you need what we call a monthly rolling financial model. which if it's a turnaround, that is the turnaround plan. If it's a high growth situation, that is your business plan. And it's expressed in numbers, every line item on every financial statement, every piece of the financial statement, your balance sheet, your income statement, your statement of changes in financial position / cash flow statement, and you project those out month over month with assumptions. So you have to have those models, and if you're doing an agreement that is referring to valuations and cash flows and things like that, well, you need the models done to do that. So they go hand in hand. As business people, for any deal that you are doing, you should be drafting your own term sheets. Non-binding, don't commit to anything without talking to your lawyer. And I'm not saying don't have legal counsel on side. I'm saying what you should be doing is drafting your own term sheets, sharing them with your counterparty, whoever you're trying to do a deal with, and flush out all of the business points that need to be flushed out. Consider the things that need to be considered. And if you do that before you engage legal counsel, you're going to make yourself a lot better. And again, I'm not telling anybody not to get legal counsel. Lawyers are awesome. You should get legal counsel. What I'm saying is the difference between a $10,000 shareholder agreement and a $75,000 shareholder agreement is knowing what the hell you're talking about when you walk in the door to your lawyer and say, hey, we need a shareholder agreement. If you haven't thought about or agreed to the business points of that shareholder agreement, it's going to be a much more expensive process. The lawyer is going to say, hey, well, okay, cool. What about tag-along rights? And you're going to go, what? Have you even talked about this? Tag-along rights with other people? It's going to be long. It's going to be expensive. And you can quite easily, with the use of artificial intelligence today, say, hey, AI, ChatGPT, Grok, I know nothing about shareholders agreements. How does that work? Oh, that's interesting. Here's my situation. What point should go in my shareholders agreement? Oh, I get it. Actually, you know what? Could you put that into the form of a term sheet, just a bullet point term sheet, non-binding, but a bullet point term sheet? Oh, what is this issue? I don't understand that issue. What is that? Okay, I'll have to talk to my co-shareholder and we'll make a decision on that and make it iterative. It costs you nothing other than a little bit of time, and it helps you get clear. What questions have I missed, ChatGPT? What have I not put into my term sheet already that I should be considering as part of a shareholder agreement? How does this work? What am I missing? You can do all that. It costs you nothing but a little bit of time. You can become your own expert. I'm telling you, you should do this on absolutely everything, and then go get your legal advice. Here we go. Non-binding bullet point term sheet. Lawyer, please draft this up. And if you have other questions, if you think we've missed something, cool. But at least we've shortcut a lot of this back and forth where we haven't thought about what we need to get done in the drafting phase. And so that's what I've been doing most of the week. And it results in non-binding term sheets or things along those lines. For example, I've told you that we are working with a client that is restructuring some of its debt. I'm not giving you any details on this, but the bottom line is we need a forbearance agreement, which I have decided is the ultimate sort of tool here to say, here's how we're going to do this. And so we had to finalize the related cash flow model and the rolling monthly model, the turnaround plan, as I had said, which is a never-ending process, but they are in pretty good shape. We have to restructure the debt as part of this. So the idea here is this company's doing fantastic. It's really growing. We're going to take a piece of this debt and we're going to convert it into equity, and that will reduce our debt load and the debt service required month to month, but also give the lender some upside. And they're creative and flexible enough that they're able to enjoy the equity piece. At least that's where we're heading on this thing. Well, I think they will, that we will get this done. So this forbearance agreement, again, bullet point, I'm not the lawyer, but putting this in bullet point form, here's the debt, here's what we're trying to restructure, here's the amount that's going to equity, here's the amount that's staying debt, Here's the term on that debt, the restructured or the repriced interest rate on that debt, the valuation used to get the equity. Here's how we exit the equity. Everybody says, yay, give me some equity. But then they forget to try to figure out how long they're going to hold that equity. How do they exit? How does, like, who's going to, what is the mechanism of the exit? At what price will it be? The shareholders agreement, all of that was going into this forbearance agreement that I've been working on this week. And it's gone very well. And my hope is we get to the point, which we should be right now, where we can say, okay, both sides signed off on this, send it off to the lawyers, ask me questions after that. If we forgot to cover something, let me know. Let me know. So that's where we're at on that. I did the same thing on a lawsuit. Now, that's not a term sheet, but we haven't discussed this much. Well, I think we have. We have a portfolio company by the name of Novanni, Novanni, up in Northern Ontario. And we were selling it off and getting our money back. And the last material piece to deal with there was the real estate. We had a purchaser. The purchaser defaulted on a binding agreement, and they asked for an extension. We didn't grant it. They took it anyways, and we talked about this before. We were going to sue them a couple of months ago. We decided not to, and they had asked unilaterally for September 15th. Oh, what date is it today? Oh, yeah, look at that, September 26th. So we've engaged counsel. We're going after it. Now, when you engage a lawyer, what do? Do you walk into their office or do a Zoom call and just have them ask you a million questions? No, it's the exact same issue. Put in bullet points, what I call a statement of fact. Use AI to do that if needed. And what I did is we took all of the email stream. I just fed it into AI. I said, create the statement of facts out of that. It did the purchase agreements, the amendments to the purchase agreements, all sorts of stuff. And then, of course, I have to be intelligent enough to direct the AI in the right direction, because it's not going to make it itself. But you end up with this bullet point statement of facts. Here's what happened. Here's my whole narrative. And now what the next step is to take that statement of facts and put it into a shared drive file, like a Dropbox, which is what we use at Sinclair Range, and then start putting references. Okay, see attachment 3. And then set up a folder for attachment 3, and that would be the email that supports the evidence. Send all that to the lawyer, and you've got a pretty good start on bringing your lawyer up to speed and not wasting a bunch of time. And so I worked on that this week. Same with many of you know about EarthProject. If you've been listening to the show and seeing our press releases, this is a portfolio company of Sinclair Range, and we're working to negotiate terms and buy some technology to process plastic waste into energy. And there's all sorts of things that we need to know and settle and sort out with our counterparty on this, who have developed this fantastic technology, and we have access to it, and all that's all great, but we don't know for sure the commercial terms. We don't have due diligence, like the data. At the end of the day, when you're doing a recycling deal, it really comes down to a handful of things. And two of those things are energy consumption and yield. And so we need to get data on that. So how do we start this off? Well, we could go back and forth with specific questions, or we can say, boom, here's a draft indicative purchase order. This is what we want to do. Let's sort out this larger list of things, and then we're going to move forward. And so there's 3 different examples of using artificial intelligence, which I did in each case, to create a bullet point business agreement to facilitate discussion, drive conversation, highlight risks, and further information required, all before you go and spend tons and tons of money on legal fees. I'm not telling you to not get a lawyer. Go get a lawyer, okay? You need to do that. But this is a more efficient way, in my view, to do business. Just checking on comments. I think we're all good here. All right. Speaking of deals, we had a great session this week on the Inner Circle Deals and Capital. What is that, you ask? The Inner Circle Deals and Capital is a free, private, live community where founders, executives, and advisors come together every 2 weeks. So we're doing it every other Tuesday on Zoom, and we pitch deals, we share challenges, we get feedback, we sharpen our strategies. The primary goals of this community is, in fact, community. education, deal review, planning review, deal pitching. Well, at this last session that we had this week, we had 4 presenters, which was probably too much because we didn't get much time to chat in a 1 hour or a hard 1 hour session. Rick Williams of Terreno Resources Corp came in and pitched his Tantalum mining project in Bolivia. And Terreno's goal was to just get some interest in the stock, which is, not really trading. There's not much volume. It's at 2 cents, but it's a fascinating project. There should be lots of upside. There's financing coming in. They could be in production in relatively short order, relatively speaking, for a mining project. And so why shouldn't people be interested in this stock right now and get a big bang? And so he made that presentation in case now at the Inner Circle and on this call and, out in the world. We are not in the securities business. We don't advise on security. I'm not telling you to do anything with respect to this. The Inner Circle is not a securities, what's the right word, community of any sort. Sinclair Range is not a securities firm. Nobody's registered to do anything here. This is for information purposes only. That's what the Inner Circle is about, to practice a pitch and to just highlight some opportunities that people could deal with as they want. And so that was done. Jeffrey Hiscock of Desmos Partners came in and talked about, this is an international group, but talked about the Canadian need for a private debt fund to help middle market and smaller businesses in Canada borrow slightly higher yield loans. And there's just a hole in this market. And he did a whole presentation on that, which I think really sparked a bunch of interest. Why is there a hole in the market? Because a lot of the Canadian funds that were doing this blew up. I don't know. Well, I'm going to say I don't know why they blew up, but in fact, I do know why they blew up, or I certainly have my hypothesis about that. Hey, Jeff on Instagram, thank you for joining us. Got to get back to my other screen here. Whenever I'm looking at comments on Instagram, I need to flip to a different screen. And so, here's the story. So there's a group in Canada by the name of 9 Point Capital, 9 Point Partners. I don't really know. And so they fund these private debt funds. And 9 Point ran into, we think, its own liquidity issues. That's certainly my conclusion from reading. And I have no inside information on this, by the way. But so this is just everything I'm saying is my understanding of what's going on, in my opinion and judgment on this. Let's not take any of it as a hard fact. But I will tell you this, that a portfolio company of Sinclair Range was a borrower of a fund that was a 9 Point fund, and they weren't making draws. Now, when you run an asset-based loan group, what you're doing is you're scooping up the company's accounts receivable in real time, and then you're releasing certain monies based on a borrowing-based calculation back to the company so they can do things like pay their payroll and their rent. And what the 9 Point guys were doing to my company was not doing the second part of that. They were not funding things on a timely basis. They were just defaulting. And I know that there's lawsuits against them for doing that on other companies too. Again, I'm not trying to speak out of school here or allege anything more nefarious than they just weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing on the lending agreements. Well, anyways, that spiraled a bit out of control. And Sinclair Range, we were funding that the whole time. That was part of our backstory during my illness. And at one point, their portfolio was, I don't know, on that fund was, I'm going to make up numbers, but to my recollection, around $380 million. And I offered them to buy the whole fund. And I think we had placed about $350 million good to go to buy that fund. And they turned us down. And I do think in hindsight that that was a mistake on their part. Anyways, we never had a real discussion with them. And the person we were talking to passed away, sadly. And so there's a lot going on there. There is a lot still going on there. But anyways, that was sort of the backdrop, because this 9 Point fund was funding a bunch of these lenders in Canada, and they're, a lot of them have kind of blown up. And so Hiscock's pitch to the Inner Circle was that we have a need for this. And I very much agree. I've been working on that. In fact, when I hang up here from this live stream, I have a call this afternoon to seal what has already been a handshake deal to launch a fund to do precisely that. And so hopefully we have good news for you in the very near future on that front. We had Jeremy Weber at the Inner Circle, who gave a presentation on the power of using employees' personal brands to what he calls humanize corporate brands, which I thought was a cool idea. Picture Sinclair Range. We have, whatever we have day to day on employees, let's call it 10 for a round number. It goes up and down with, depending on who's working that day, new hirings, people leaving, which is very low. We have very low turnover here, but portfolio companies, like at some point we're saying we had 200 employees, which we did through wholly owned subsidiaries. But let's just use a number of 10 for now. The Sinclair Range brand, the corporate brand for all of these things, is very, very strong. But what if we had each employee doing their own personal branding exercise on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever, and it was a coordinated strategy, so they all become, in a sense, micro influencers for the same cause? That's basically what he's saying, is put a human face onto the corporate brand. So we had a discussion about that at the Inner Circle, which I thought was pretty cool. We had Sienna Lending Group, Dwayne Morrison, join us and tell us about what Sienna does for a living. And I'm trying to get permission from Dwayne and Sienna Lending and Jeremy Weber on the branding side, because we do keep recordings of these presentations, and maybe we can hive those off. Well, we already have hived off those recordings. I'm going to send it to these people and get their approval. And if so, we will put that on the Sinclair Range website, and you can see them as well. But what you really ought to be doing is coming to join the Inner Circle, register. Just send a note anywhere that you're listening to this, and we will get you as a member of the Inner Circle. What else can we talk about today? I got a cold email. Do you ever get this in your business? Someone just emails you, it looks like spam, and it's like, hey, we want to buy Sinclair Range, and you just ignore those things most of the time. But this one was particularly well written, I thought, and so professional. And so I don't like clicking links on these. It could be some sort of phishing exercise. And so I separately Google, and they're legit people, really, really legit people. With huge, huge dollars behind them. And they're looking to, I'm not even sure what they're looking to do, but it involves using Sinclair Range as a platform to start off their consolidation merger plan. That was my interpretation of it. So I don't know. Do you respond to these things? I never do, but I did to this one, and we have a call next week. I should be clear for all of you, since I'm sharing this journey, that we have nothing to sell. There's no, we have a terrific brand. We have our people. That's all fantastic. But when we went over the cliff, I was ill for a while there. I think we lost tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars of value, and we're rebuilding that, and things are going terrific. I couldn't be any happier on the trajectory we're on. But in terms of selling the business right now, that doesn't make any sense at all. And so we'll see. I'll let you know how we're doing that as best I can. I'm sure there's a bunch of confidentialities around that. But bottom line is I returned a cold email. They do work. Last week, we talked about a client that had a receivership motion against them. This week, they were in court. We did end up with a settlement of sorts right before we went into court, sort of the night before. So that brings a circle to that. We have time to bring forward deals under a sales process that we've been working on, and things on this file do not work in what I would consider to be the normal or reasonable fashion, but whatever, we are where we are, and I think we have some solutions to the problem if in fact our counterparty, not necessarily the bank that wants to put it in the receiver, but their hyper aggressive advisors are the real problem on this file. And so we'll see where we get to, but I think we have some solutions. I'm excited about that, and hopefully we've added some value. This is the last day at Sinclair Range for employee Jenny Young. She's leaving for greener pastures, as I say. I will say that I just want to say thank you, Jenny, for sticking with us through this transition. Jenny was there when we were struggling with me being away, and there were shenanigans going on in one of our subsidiaries, and she was running HR in that subsidiary, and everybody else from that company is gone. I mean, everybody except for Jenny, and we got her to stay on and help us through a transition. And she did. She was reliable. She was honest. She did a terrific job. And it would have been a hard gig for her. She's remote and isolated from the rest of the Sinclair Range team. Had no real full-time role other than just helping us transition through this piece, which she has done. And so that would have been hard on the mind for her, for sure. But I think it was successful, and we did our part, and now she has an opportunity she needs to go take, and she's gonna stick around and give us advice from time to time on the side. So Jenny, thank you very much for sticking with us. Good luck with your next challenges. Where am I on time? I think I am perfect. Thank you for listening, everybody. Thanks for all the kind words in the comments and the direct messages. Oh, by the way, I had a question about Bitcoin and US dollar. I'm not going to address that because I totally forgot until right now. Maybe I'll try to tackle that next week. Reach out. If you are a business and company and you're going through a transition, whether that be high growth or financial distress, that's what we're here for. Reach out. If you're doing a deal, reach out. And apart from that, we will talk to you next week at the Sinclair Range Week in Review. Thank you for listening.